Why did you cut off your friend? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. I ended up in the hospital and he laughed and posted on Instagram making fun of me. I could have died and he was laughing instead of helping. Story 2. I cut off with all my friends 3 years ago. I was an addict, and so were they. Moved to another country to get sober. It worked, sober 3 years in August. I have not found a single friend in these 3 years. It's lonely, but at least I am sober and healthier. Edit. Thanks for the support and kind words from you all. Story 3. His own brother found him, the friend, sleeping with his girlfriend. If someone could do their own brother like that, they could fudge me over a million different ways. Answer. His own brother found him, the friend, sleeping with his girlfriend. Did this confuse anyone else, LOL? At first, I was thinking that it was pretty darn rude for someone to walk in on a couple sleeping in their own space. Eventually, I put it together that he was naked wrestling someone else's girlfriend entirely. That would be devastating. I really feel for the brother. I hope he spoke to a therapist after, because something like that can cause serious trust issues, and then a rift was torn in the family. Story 4. I realized that I was the only person making an effort in the friendship. I made plans. I reached out. I was initiating everything. I stopped and decided to wait until they reached out. They never did. Easy to move on from that. And sir, that's basically my entire friend group from college. I tried to keep in touch and hang out with them after graduation, but eventually I realized I was on the outside. I never got that feeling when I lived with them. We did everything together. But then I realized they were doing a bunch of stuff without me after graduation. So I did exactly what you did and stopped talking to them. Not a single person ever reached out. Them and their significant others continue to hang out. Story 5. I called her to tell her the biopsy came back positive and I had cancer. And after a very insincere, "Oh, that's horrible, I'm here for you," she once again hijacked the conversation to talk about her latest boyfriend. I realized she would never prioritize me the way I prioritized her. I was just done. Answer. Similar to me, both my parents died 4 months apart, and when my best friend told me to call her to talk about it, she just talked about her workday the whole time. She did this 3 times in a row, and so I told her it hurt my feelings that she was talking about herself when, I'm grieving and need support right now, and then she told me I was attacking her and blocked and deleted me on all social media and text message, and 4 days later reappeared to apologize. I just said thanks, but we're done. 8-year friendship gone just like that. I was her ride or die and held her through everything, and when I needed her, she was nowhere to be found and erased me. What the fudge? Story 6. Because she slept with another friend's boyfriend, then acted like she was doing her a favor. Because he wasn't that into her. She also regularly hit on me and my other male friends when she was tipsy. All of us dudes are married, and she knows our wives, so yeah, she's kinda garbage. It's been close to 10 drama-free years now. Story 7. Her and her husband tried to take advantage of me while I was tipsy. Faked sleep to get out of it. Went to the airport 8 hours early. 20 years of friendship gone. Sober fish now. I only wish I had not said, "Take good care of your mom," to the older kid when I left. That's not his job. Story 8. We planned something for over a month and he ghosted me when we were going to meet up. We had been friends for years, but he was constantly late, ghosting, and didn't really put much effort into making plans. I told him that what he did was shoot and never spoke to him again. Story 9. I desperately tried to stay in touch for so long. She'd reply, but never initiate. So I just gave up. Answer, I'm sorry, this is me. As a kid, it was made obvious that we were burdens that no one wanted. Divorced parents fought over who had to take us. Even when I want to reach out to a friend, I think I'm sure they are busy with something more important. I don't want to be a bother. I don't know if this is why your friend is like that, but I know I'm horrible at reaching out. Story 10. I was tired of her toxicity and always talking about other people behind their backs. It doesn't take a genius to realize that if she is talking badly about other people behind their backs, she is also doing it about me too. Story 11. He came to my house all kinds of angry because I wasn't giving him enough physical affection. I'm happily married for 25 years, not to him. He was mad that a year ago someone had asked if we were dating, and I said no, we were friends. He said that it made him feel like he was put forever in the friend zone and never had a chance with me. Then he proceeded to argue with me about whether or not I was obligated to give him any kind of physical affection. I asked him why he didn't think that his other friends owed him any, and he said, yeah, but I don't like them that way, as if his feelings for me somehow made him entitled to my affection. Answer, Elmo. My girlfriend kind of knows how this feels. We were walking my friend Dee home after she invited herself on our date. We get a block from her house and she starts throwing a fit that my girlfriend was holding my hand. but not hers as well? My girlfriend was baffled as she stomped around like a child, and then she wouldn't talk to us the rest of the way, just slammed the door. Story 12. She's Christian and very religious. I thought I'd be able to get along with someone who has beliefs so vastly different from mine, and we did for a while, but she was always struggling financially and I was always paying to help her. When she needed a new car, I bought it for her. She was very thankful to her God for making that happen. I got barely a mention. I met her parents one time and we all had dinner. Her dad told me a story about how he bought the house they lived in. The crux of the story was that the previous owners had a major setback and tragically had to part with the house in a hurry and take a crappy deal. He told me this story because it was supposed to be something called witnessing, where he is convincing me of his beliefs. But to me, it was just someone's very unfortunate event that he chose to exploit. I saw no virtue in it. I realized that I was not compatible with this aspect of her faith, that anything good that happens is because of her God, and the humans who actually made it happen don't deserve more than a cursory nod. Story 13. He was high all the time and begged me to help him get sober. He went to a meeting with a counselor I organized for him, only to proceed to switch from plant substance to DMT. Over the years, he went from being high at a party once a month to once a weekend to all weekend to all week to 247. The last few months of our friendship, his days started with a joint before going to the bathroom. I went to counseling with him. I went for walks, runs, to the gym with him. I fed him and held his puke bucket when he was coming down from something. Just one day, I had had a bad time for a while, and I needed him for a piece of serious advice. His reply was laughter and belittling me. That's when I realized I can't keep this human in my life any longer. And guys, I tried. I gave him my all. Story 14. They were too attached and dependent on me. Started feeling overwhelming and obsessive. He would simply put his feelings above others. Not on purpose, but I was struggling myself. I couldn't continue. Story 15. He was a user and a manipulator, and as I later learned, had a history of abuse toward both his partners and their children. He would constantly complain, "Everyone always abandons me." For a while that worked on me. I trusted the stories he told and believed his version of events. Eventually, though, he let his guard down, and I began to notice the signs of abuse. We had a mutual friend, and when that friend suddenly cut ties with him, I grew curious and asked why. We compared notes. It turned out he had been tailoring different stories to each of us. The mutual friend had also started to witness the abuse firsthand. That was it for me. I cut him off and blocked him on everything. I thought that was the end of it. But a couple of weeks ago, someone I had never met showed up at my house. She said she was supposed to meet someone at my address. When I looked confused, she showed me her phone. There was a text conversation with only her messages visible. The number at the top was his. I don't know what that was about, but I told her to pass along a message. Tell him to stop sending people to check up on me. Since then, I've received a few voicemails from him, acting like nothing happened and pretending everything is still normal. Story 16. She had extremely poor boundaries, unmanaged mental health issues, and refused to hold herself accountable. It wasn't possible to reason with her, much less tell her how her actions may have caused harm. In order to protect my own emotional well-being, I had to cut her off completely. Story 17. Ikin. I realized that they, A, were only using me to borrow money, get free booze. B, only called text when they needed something. Shinonai were not growing as a person. D, never asked me once how I was doing. E, stole from their own family. I'm a pretty forgiving person, but even I have my limits and needed to respect myself at the end of the day as well. Answer, I had a friend like this. At first, when he would call, it was like a buddy just looking to catch up, and we would chat for 45 minutes, and then he would ask for cash, and it was always dire. Eventually, the chats got shorter before he asked for cash. Then there was no chat, just asking for money. Then he stopped calling and asked through text. I had to cut him loose. Story 18. Because of my own stupid depression, I never wanted to cut anyone out. I just go too long wanting to be alone. Story 19. He was a Nazi, and I don't mean that like he had slightly conservative views. He didn't like interracial couples. He thought America should be a nation for white people. And he added me to a Telegram channel where people were sharing recipes to napalm and stuff. I decided to leave that chat and the friendship in short order. Answer, OMG. One of my cousins went full Nazi. He lives with his parents, so when family get-togethers happen, he's there. And we talk, and most of the time he's normal and fine. And then he says something out of pocket, and I'm like, oh yeah. He went full Nazi. He's bipolar, and I wasn't sure if the Nazi thing was a mental health issue or not, but his brother had a blow-up fight with him and his mother a few years ago and said he never wanted to see his brother again, never wanted to speak to him again. Brother moved out of state, and brother has never been invited to the new place. He has a wife and 2 kids now, and Nazi cousin has never met them. My aunt and uncle went away for a few weeks and asked my mom to check in on my cousin, make sure he's okay by himself. She asked me to call him. Nope. Why, you get along. Yeah, I can deal with the once-a-year family dinner. I'm not calling him to chit-chat. Man's a fudge Nazi. Story 20. Because every single time we got into an argument that he usually instigated, I was the only one to extend the olive branch. I refused to be friends with anyone who isn't willing to admit when they were wrong or how their words' actions affected someone. Story 21. It turned into a one-sided thing. I was the only one to call or to stop by. I would always help them with things, but they never had time to help me. Long ago they did, but not anymore. Not for many years. They started forcing their newer interests upon me and repeatedly shamed me and expressed their disappointment in me for not liking their new interests. There are all sorts of things like this. Music, restaurants, types of food, types of vehicles, types of people for new friends. And the best one, when their job turned to garbage, they had someone get them in the door of a great paying job with some awesome benefits. Several bonuses each year, like $20,000 to $25,000 a year in just bonuses. They are a pharmaceutical production worker and are making $100,000 per year with these bonuses. That's why medicine is so much. One reason anyway. But the problem is that I lost my job due to a place closing down and moving out of the US. I had worked there for 20 years. No one has a job doing what I used to do. At this place where my friend works, you need to have a friend inside in order to get hired. This former friend has repeatedly refused to help me get a job there. Me. Hey, I really need a good job. Can you help me get a job there? Friend. Well, I can, but I won't do that. Me. Okay, why not? Friend. I just won't. Not this job, but every job they had a connection help them get in the door. Story 22. Because I realized that he looked at our friendship as a ledger. I did this for you, you didn't do this for me, etc. He also used something I told him confidence against me. Totally unforgivable. Story 23. He tried to sleep with the girl I was talking to because she was tipsy. She called me to pick her up, told me what happened, and multiple other friends came forward with their version of the events. All stories checked out about that night. Anyone that would take advantage of someone else in a drunken state is a piece of shoot, but trying that on your friend's girl is especially evil. Story 24. One threatened to eliminate me. 3 others started taking hard substances. And no, the first one wasn't one of the other 3. Story 25. Our conversations are never about me. One time I traveled to a location to take an important professional exam. She knew about this as we were roommates at the time, and I even talked to her about how nervous I was before I left that morning. After hours of exam, I finally got out and got my phone back. When I turned on my phone, her message popped up, and it was about her relationship drama. Something like, why did he say this to me? At that moment, I realized she gave zero fudge about me, or actually about anyone else, aside from herself and her boyfriend. Story 26. She was whining about a failed relationship that lasted a month in high school, 10 years prior, and I told her I was not mentally or emotionally capable of being there for her at that moment because I was going through something. Then she lost her shoot on me for trauma dumping and being unfair to her needs when I answered what's going on. With my father is dying of cancer, and I'm pulling 60-hour weeks to keep the family afloat. Story 27. Helped plan a robbery home invasion against me and helped execute said robbery home invasion against me. Story 28. Because she slept with my ex-boyfriend of 2 years. That's just not the type of person you want around. Story 29. I had a friend through a friend that hovered in our circle for far too long. There are many notable reasons why this guy was scum and needed to be cut off, but the final straw for him getting cut off from the group was when he was invited with us to share a cabin at the wilderness in Wisconsin Dells, and the very first night he challenged all the other guys to play wrestle. And then when he was losing, did some sort of leg lock that fudged the guy's ankle for the rest of the trip and made it so he couldn't enjoy the trip on the first night. He also constantly posted on Facebook about how much he loved his girlfriend and how perfect she was, while openly talking to all of us about cheating on her and bragging about how he talked some girl he just met at a music festival into giving him a blowy in the bathroom. He literally posted minutes later from the festival about how much he missed his GF and wished he was there, like sheer scum. I was able to follow his oblivious to his own assholery through social media, When one day I finally couldn't take any more of his all lives matter and thinly veiled racist shoot, I posted about how ignorant his posts were, and then he lectured me and blocked me. I still dislike you, Nate. F you, LOL. F you. Story 30. When I grew tired of feeling criticized over everything. When she asked how it was that she has never been married, and yet am engaged to be married for the second time. When she pouted and tried to make me feel guilty for not spending an entire day in SF for her birthday when I was in the middle of moving. When I asked her not to put my kids' bed together because my fiancé would do it when he got home from work, and with the utmost contemptuous look on her face, said I do not rely on a man to do anything for me. Good for you, but I do. 25 years of friendship over. I have zero regrets. Story 31. We were walking somewhere in the middle of summer, and due to the extreme heat, I ended up getting heat stroke, and she left me on the sidewalk. I was close to passing out, puking, and sweating like crazy. If it weren't for a nurse and a very kind man, Ediki, what would have happened? Story 32. My best friend of 10 years became an alcoholic that verbally abused me and lied constantly. I was losing my sanity and stability with her in my life. Story 33. Him and my ex didn't disclose they used to be FWB before we started dating, let alone tell me they would hook up if she needed space away from me, and continued to do so after I found out. Every now and then, it still pisses me off. Story 34. He was almost constantly condescending and wanted me to live my life only his way. Fudge that in him. Story 35. CW, dark mental health stuff. She was abusive and manipulative. I was 15 when we met and she was in her early 20s. There was nothing romantic or intimacy or gross stuff like that. All but she had severe mental health struggles, and it became my problem too. I got really messed up into my late teens. Got into SH, wrote a will at 17 years old, some other stuff. Finally had a blowout with her when I was in my early 20s and began to think about how messed up it would be to treat a teenager like a punching bag and use them as an emotional crutch the way she did to me. Honestly, was the first time I got mad on my own behalf and called her out on something, and she didn't appreciate it. Last I heard from her, she was blaming me for her upcoming attempt. Who cares? I cut her off, and the only thing I regret is the years I lost and my continuing mental health struggle. Story 36. Because she only hung around me when her best friends were too busy to give her the time of day. She would dislike when I'd lift up my phone for a few minutes to MSG my BF, but whenever her best friends would MSG her, she would spend the entire hangout time just emptying them. Story 37. She got bored and irritable when I mentioned that my kidneys were failing again. She wanted to talk about her stupid, incompetent coworkers. Phone conversation. I sent her an email later on, telling her to never contact me again. She didn't, and my kidneys were okay after all. Funny how a life-threatening illness can expose the true colors of your family and friends. Story 38. We were co-workers and became close friends fast. I got promoted to a position higher than her one day, and I think she was jealous despite them originally trying to give her the position, but her declining because it was too stressful for her. She started nitpicking me here and there under the pretense of critiquing, which I don't mind constructive criticism. But then she started gossiping about my work and me behind my back to other people. I was new to the city at the time, and she was my first friend. And I heard down the line she was telling people I was a loser with no other friends, which I couldn't help really. Then she made up a lie. Told me I was severely lacking in my work, and she heard management wasn't happy, and that I need to find a way to do better in my job or I would lose it, and that she was only saying this to help me because she cared about me. Ugh. I figured if this was true, I should have a meeting with my boss about this. Turns out it wasn't true, and I wasn't the first co-worker of hers she pulled this stunt on. I cut her off as a friend. She got fired for workplace bullying and gossiping. Last thing she said to me was, "I don't even think you're pretty." I said that to make you feel better. This was a 50-year-old woman. Answer, I got a friend from school a job at my company. After a few years, I ended up managing him, and he expected me to cover for him and let him slack off. I did for a little while, but soon realized that at some point his terrible stats would come to light, and I'd be blamed for not coaching him up sooner. So I let him fail, and he ended up getting fired by the person who took over my manager role after I left shortly after for a transfer. As I looked back, I could see his manipulative behavior back at school. Hindsight's 20/20 sometimes. Story 39. My friend got substances down the MAGA propaganda hole, and no matter how hard I tried to educate him out of it, I couldn't. Eventually, I just couldn't bring myself to talk to him anymore. It wasn't that he loved Trump, But he was falling for every scrap of misinformation and propaganda they put out. They scared the daylights out of him, making him believe that the Democrats were literally destroying the country and purposefully leading vast amounts of illegal immigrants into the country for political gain. He was convinced that if Harris became president, that it would lead to World War III. He was convinced that Elon's Doge bullshit was a good idea and was going to make a big difference in fighting corruption. That's just how strong the propaganda is. Eventually, I just couldn't deal with his lack of intelligence anymore. I showed him research and data and everything I could to try and convince him that the propaganda he was hearing was false. But the best I would ever get from him was, I guess we will see. He was never willing to admit that maybe he could be wrong, never willing to trust my research. TikTok fear-mongering propaganda clips had just rotted away whatever critical thinking he had. He has been a friend I have interacted with almost daily for the last 15 years. But one day I just couldn't bring myself to talk to him, and I haven't since. I don't think I will be able to face him again until the Trump presidency is over, and even then I don't know if I can. It's not even the fact that he voted for Trump alone that made me want to separate. It was his complete unwillingness to trust me or listen to anything I had to say, and trust random TikTok videos instead that really turned me off. Since I couldn't convince him of his faulty logic, I already see that he is likely doomed into falling prey to even more of this propaganda and lose whatever semblance of critical thinking he has left. I'm angry because at his core, I know he has good morals. I've known him for a long time. He is just politically ignorant and easily swayed by propaganda. And there is a good chance that right now he is already realizing that he made a bad choice in voting for Trump. But that only makes me angrier in some respect. People shouldn't get to vote to destroy our country and then afterwards go, oops, I didn't know. Because you should have known. Everyone, including your best friend, was telling you. Story 40, I was having one of the worst days of my life. I had just heard a classmate had died. My mom was going in for surprise emergency abdominal surgery, and I had just been asked to resign from my job, which meant losing my housing and insurance as well. I called the person I thought was my best friend, who also frankly had a strong friendship of her own with my mom. She made some bored noises as I explained what happened, emotionlessly said something like, "That really sucks, I'm so sorry," and hung up. Not one question, not one sign of actual interest. I went back through our text messages for the previous 6 months and realized I had started every conversation and I didn't have a best friend anymore. I tried not contacting her just to see what would happen. Almost a year later, she asked for a professional recommendation for resources for one of her clients, which I gave her because it wasn't the client's fault. Every conversation since has been her deciding to brag to me about something. Honestly, I keep the lines of communication open because I need to remember who she really is now. She went and visited my mom a couple years ago. She treats my mom well, it's fine, but I don't know who she is anymore. Story 41. I researched the bird ever on. She told a guy we just met that I sent private pictures. For the record, I don't, but that's none of anyone else's business, her included. It was completely unprompted. We were standing in a group, he and I were talking about video games, and during a break in our conversation, she leaned over and said, she sends private pictures right in front of him, me, and the 3 other friends who were with us. The guy asked me later, why TF did she say that? And I didn't have an answer for him. She did a lot of shit like that to me, both behind my back and in front of my face, but that was my last straw. I'd known the guy for 3 days, maximum. Story 42. I was so dumb to think they were my best friend, but all she wanted was a free time idiot. And once I got my own share of depression and embarrassment and harassment in that friendship, I just cut off. Story 43. He let me ride around on a motorcycle that was stolen in an insurance scam. He was an all-around liar that I had to verify everything, and people started to get to know me as Derek's friend. I had pretty well distanced myself from him, but the last straw was when he found out I was voting for Obama. He asked why I would vote for an N-word, drove by a house he was renting a while back, and there was a Trump flag, so it all tracks. Story 44. Our morals and values no longer aligned with each other's. Our friendship lasted over 35 years, but things started changing approximately 10 years ago. Story 45. She's a Trumper back in West Virginia. I got sick of hearing what she told me. When I backed her into a logical corner, she said, well, that's okay. That means it's the apocalypse. That's when you get to go to heaven early if you believe in the Lord. Lux, you don't want to hear that shit. Stupid Trump voting, fuck. Story 46. Bro asked, Why don't we have White History Month? Bro also said George Floyd got what he deserved. Haven't talked to his jerk in years, and if I have any say in it, never again. Story 47. Telling our Polish friend a Holocaust joke was the last straw. She was abusive towards both of us, and a few years ago, we just went, you know what? No. Story 48. He wasn't a good friend. Years of taking advantage of me, years of lying, and ditching me to hang out with my exes. Cock-blocked so many times. Craziest one was he knew I was trying to get with this girl, and mid-conversation he butts himself in and goes, "Are you still going to bang that other girl today, bro?" I couldn't deal anymore. Now he messages me every few weeks asking to hang out, and it's been years since I've hung out with him. I don't even talk to him anymore. Horrible friend. Story 49. She was my best friend. She'd gotten engaged all of a sudden, and then her and fiance were being evicted, so I let them move in with me until they could find a place of their own. They couldn't, apparently, get a place of their own, so I signed a lease for her and loaned her the bond with the understanding she'd be responsible for all the rent since I wasn't actually living there, and could pay me back the bond when she could. 3 months later, I got served a summons for the overdue rent as the real estate found out where I actually lived. They hadn't paid a cent of the rent that was owed. I had to pay the rent with interest, and I got the bad mark on my rental record and credit score. At the time, I had to get a loan to repay it, as it wasn't insubstantial, and put me into financial stress. I was only barely able to get by. I demanded she pay me back. I understood that she didn't have the means to pay anything meaningful back. But as an act of good faith, I asked her to repay one a week until she was on her feet again. Well, you know what happened, don't you? Excuses, excuses, excuses. And I forgave and forgave because she was my best friend, and I would have done anything for her. Meanwhile, they'd moved interstate all of a sudden. Like I was talking to her the day before, and she had said nothing about the move to me. And a letter I got from her after the move was a story about how they'd loaned some guy at the pub 50, and when that guy didn't pay it back, they went around to his place and set his veranda on fire. She did not see the irony in telling me that. Phoenix turned out to be some sort of minor mobster who had a record a mile long for arson and petty crimes, and the sudden move interstate was to evade the law. He had many debt collectors after him too. I know because they contacted me a lot about his whereabouts because I had signed that darn lease on his last known address. She clearly wasn't the person I thought I knew. A friend of mine wouldn't think it was okay to not repay debts. A friend of mine wouldn't think it was okay to set fire to property over 50. A friend of mine wouldn't endorse a lifestyle of crime and mobster behavior. I went no contact. The last letter I got from her was her seemingly genuinely surprised and upset about my withdrawal from her life. She thought she hadn't done anything wrong, and it was all her fiancé's fault, except I hadn't lent him the money I had lent to her, and if she couldn't understand why I didn't want to stay involved, that told me that I was doing the right thing by not being involved. The last time I looked, they were both doing time, and their kids are wards of the state. I am not surprised. Saddened, but not surprised. Story 50. Friends for over 25 years, so I thought I really knew the guy. Best man at my wedding. One night, after a couple of beers, he spewed all kinds of racist doctrine, just pure bile I won't repeat here. Never heard even a little of that kind of garbage from the guy. He's college educated, a successful businessman in the community who has plenty of Black and Latino customers. And I pushed back, really wanting to know where all this was coming from. His response convinced me it was coming from a broken mind and a sick, putrid soul. Like pure Nazi bullshit, guy's whole life is a fraud. I paid the tab, got up to leave, and told him I would never cross his threshold, that he needed therapy, and he would never be welcome in my home again. That was 3 years ago. He tried to reach out last Christmas. I blocked his number. Still hard to grapple with. Story 51. He started down the anti-LGBTQ bandwagon. My kid is trans. Understand I'd hung out with the person for 20 years at this point, and I used to hang out with him a lot. Started small. He didn't want drag queens reading to kids. I can accept that even if I disagree with it. Then he didn't think they should get any special rights. And the special rights were just basic rights. His niece got on him at this point, and I stopped hanging out with him. Then he got really into saying they shouldn't get married but not to worry, because they could and the law wasn't going to change. There is a case right now that would flip the decision back to the states. Guess where I'm expecting that to go? This is the point I stopped interacting with him meaningfully, but he was a member of one of my main friend groups, so I just shut up. Finally, he started posting that LGBTQ people needed to just shut up about everything and be good and quiet. That's a garbage attitude, but he was posting it on Facebook from a group that wasn't just advocating that LGBTQ people sit down and shut up. Every other post just wanted them dead, and following the link to the main group was a bunch of people making oblique references to LGBTQ people just vanishing. At that point, I decided I had to choose whether or no I respected my child, and I did so. I cut him off entirely with a him or me discussion with my friend group. More accurately, I said, I'm going to stop hanging with you guys because of him. My entire friend group was incredibly uncomfortable around him at that point, and we cut him out. He still thinks it is because he voted for Trump, and not that he was posting 3x a day advocating that LGBTQ people need to not exist. People don't abandon you for voting for Trump. They abandon you because you are the kind of person who votes for Trump. Answer, I am so sorry that happened. I want to say that as a trans person whose parents just try and ignore it, it fills my heart with joy that you would protect your trans child like that. And I also know how you feel as well. My friend T ended up like this without me even noticing it was happening. Just this Mother's Day, she posted that trans parents weren't real parents, and their day is April 1st. She knows I am trans. She has seen my post. Then a week later, she posts advocating using the R slur as well as other ones. Again, I am autistic, and she knows it. Really stung, but I blocked her everywhere because I just don't need that kind of person in my life. Story 52. When I realized she was way too comfortable lying to me to save face and was easily manipulated by men she loved, I just didn't trust her nor her judgment anymore, so I stepped away. Story 53. The dude moved to FL and turned MAGA, and we both grew up poor ASF. Once the takedown, capital of the world. PPL talk like politics is just theory or opinion. But the truth is, what some call just ideas are policies that shape how we live. Who gets care? Who gets punished? Who's safe? And who isn't? Whether it's cutting social programs, rewriting history in schools, or targeting specific groups, these aren't abstract debates. They hit real people. Ideas aren't neutral. They become laws, they become bans, they become budgets, and people live or die by them. Story 54. Recently decided to cut off 2 guy friends who were overwhelmingly condescending and misogynistic in every way. I don't want to surround myself with low-quality people who go against everything I stand for. Story 55. Trump. Several friends and most of my family. This isn't a political matter. It's a matter of morals and values. Story 56. Because he outed himself as a Trumper, I was aware he wasn't politically aware, but I would think that his job, which takes him around the world and has led him to work with people from numerous backgrounds and sexualities, would have given him a more open-minded attitude. Unfortunately, it did not, and he outed himself as a bigot and a homophobe all at once. Though technically, I didn't cut him off. I simply said that if he doesn't feel an obligation to do what he can to fight against bigotry, then we couldn't be friends. He didn't respond and blocked me on social media. Shrug whatever, don't need right-wing weirdos around me. Story 57. When I realized they voted for Trump, which means that their moral compass does not align with mine at all. Story 58. She canceled twice on plans she suggested. Then the final straw was canceling the day of my housewarming party. Friends for 20 years, bridesmaids in each other's weddings. Story 59. She would lie about stuff, and when confronted, she would deny what she said. She was also very fake, and she would try to befriend. You then go behind your back. She's studying to be a doctor now, and I feel bad for her future patients. Story 60. Because it wasn't safe, mentally and emotionally, to be around him anymore. I still see his posts on social media from time to time, and he seems to be doing much better now that he's away from his family. Story 61. We had a disagreement, and she was very rude in my opinion, with a way more of swearing words and insults than the situation deserved. I was absolutely shocked because I normally don't fight with people and believe that there's always a civil way out of an argument. Her words were very hurtful, and I took them as, I don't want to talk anymore. So I wrote a goodbye message and thought, this is over. Later, I found out through a mutual friend that this girl was quite surprised to see a goodbye message because she thought it's just a normal fight and will calm down and forget about it soon. I was shocked again, thought hard about it, and figured that for me, it is not all right to be friends with someone who thinks it's normal to yell at and insult someone you call a friend. So yeah, a couple of years of friendship ends here. Story 62. After saying hi several times a day over text him, I'd respond and then they'd proceed to talk about themselves or stuff they had going on. Never ask me how I was. Story 63. She had serious anger management and addiction issues that was affecting her home, her job, and her dog. I tried to help, but things always blew up, so I called it quits and left. Story 64. My best friend was my cousin, 2 years younger than me. We were like brothers. Every weekend we slept over at each other's houses. We were constantly together riding bikes and playing video games and being neighborhood nuisances. From the age of 5, we were tight. We're talking a good 35 years. And then Trump happened. Cousin put on the red hat of dislike. A family member died during COVID. We had a small funeral. Cousin started in the anti-vax COVID as a myth rant to me during the funeral. I told him that wasn't the place. After the funeral, apparently the parking lot was the place. We had a big fight. Haven't seen him since. 5 years now. I never would have imagined. Story 65. She was jealous I scored a better job with better pay, and I was happy. She got very jealous, but it ended after I had felt used for months, and the resentment from her was building, and her words were, "You do you," as a total nasty response to me trying to share my feelings with her about our friendship. She didn't care, and I realized I had partied too hard 4 years in a codependent friendship that was obviously over now that I had improved my life. I think she feared I had moved past her with my new job. So it's been 2 years. I don't regret my decision, even though I was lonely for a long time. She was toxic and jealous. Story 66. She insinuated that there was no such thing as SA, and it was cheating. This happened when she talked about a mutual friend of ours who I was a lot closer with. I cut her off immediately and warned the mutual friend how she felt. Safe to say, none of us talked to her anymore. Story 67. I saw the way she showed up for her man and other friends and realized I wasn't as important to her as she was to me. Had to toss out the breadcrumbs. Story 68. She only called me when it was time for her kids' birthdays or Christmas. Yeah, I love being reminded 4 times a year that I need to give a gift to someone who never returns my calls. Fudge you, Linda. Story 69. The conservative turned sort of MAGA, then spiraled. I couldn't do it anymore. I can disagree with someone and be friends. When we crossed the line to cultic, I had to walk away. Story 70. He was driving me to a party where we were going to be drinking out in the middle of the woods. Dude couldn't wait that long and asked me to hand him one of the white claws that was next to me in the back seat. When I refused, he reached back and grabbed one himself while driving on the freeway. When we got to the party, he and his girlfriend that was in the front passenger seat went to find a place to set up their tent for the night. Didn't see them again for hours. It was like 2 p.m. by the time we got there. Turns out he'd been shit-faced the whole time and had to sleep it off for a while before rejoining the party looking haggard. Haven't talked to him since, and he was one of my best friends since high school. This was about 3 years ago. Story 71. On the verge of that right now with someone because he's so incredibly immature. Despite being in his mid-30s, it's honestly almost embarrassing, my God. Story 72. Once I looked around and realized I was always the one listening. They'd leave lighter, and it'd stay behind, carrying the weight of their emotions, though I never really had a safe space to share my own. We used to laugh until 2 a.m., dream up business ideas and music festivals over coffee-stained napkins, and promise we'd grow old together. But over time, the calls got mechanical, the silences got suspicious, and the jokes turned a little too sharp, especially when they started recycling things that once confided in them, turned into punchlines or weapons. I started shrinking myself to keep things smooth, and I mistook that exhaustion for loyalty, so I chose silence. A quiet exit, no drama. I guess this is growing, they said. Story 73. Because they would only call message visit when they needed to vent about something bad happening. If I tried to talk about something bothering me, they never had time, and never a word from them when everything was fine or to just hang out. I'm not an emotional trash can. Story 74. They just ran away from me while I got jumped. Lack of loyalty is for me a one-way ticket to the dumpster. Story 75. Before 2020 election, I asked him how welding school was going. Without even answering the question, he launches into a bizarre rant about unions and Biden, then just shoot-talking Biden in general, with the usual conspiracy talking points. He eventually pauses for breath, long enough I can get a word in. I'm not really a fan of Biden either, but it'd still take him over Trump, full-blown screaming, red in the face, insulting me and my family personally, before kicking me out of his apartment and slamming the door. Dude I'd known for over 20 years. It's a disease. Story 76. She was never there for me when I needed her. I was always there. Hours on FaceTime when she was going through relationship drama. Anytime I needed someone to talk to, I got left undelivered. Story 77. Didn't come to my wedding after RSVPing and verbally confirming. Then didn't bother saying congratulations, reacting on social media or sending a gift. Story 78. She was one of those people who prided herself on being brutally honest, but was more interested in the brutality than in the honesty. Story 79. He was a conservative, which was fine. We could always have civil disagreements over politics, until he moved to a red state. After that, he kind of went off the deep end. I couldn't even call to ask if he'd seen the latest Marvel movie without him launching into a rant about how this country was founded on Christian values. Story 80. Because they started to tell me that DEI was leading to unqualified doctors, lawyers, etc., I told them that that's racist. They kicked me out of their house because they were offended by that. Story 81. Trump voter pro-lifer who disregarded the fact that other shot Trump will hurt literally his own family and friends. Story 82. She was defrauding the U.S. government by getting a job, quitting 2 weeks in so she could keep her food stamps. We were both in college. She tried convincing me to get on food stamps, but I told her that I was fine on my tater tot and ramen noodle diet. I grew up dirt poor, and I just couldn't imagine taking food stamps when I was able to provide food for myself. Story 83. I have cut off a couple of friends over the politics of these times, but I didn't enjoy it. I'm mostly tolerant of differences and prefer to remain friends, but sometimes you gotta let go. In kinder, gentler times, it was much easier to be friends with people of all political persuasions. It's sad, really. One Story 84. He is voting for almost fascist political party. He wants to get rid of whole LGBT community because it's unnatural. He dislikes all of the people of color or Ukrainians. I never spoke to him again. Story 85. Every time I ask her to let's get dressed up and go out, she flakes. But then I see her on social media dressed up cute. Out! LOL. Story 86. He was a childish douchebag. He asked me to kidnap his ex's cat after they broke up to hold it for ransom. No way. My other friend was cool, but after COVID hit, they were very anti-vax and pro-Trump, so I slowly just stopped seeing them. Story 87. I have no friends, but I did cut off the whole family. Best decision I made in the last few months. The reason, if you cannot reach out to me while I'm dealing with an illness, then I understand where I stand. So I just dropped them from all my socials. My dad was cut off about 9 months ago. All the remaining family is now cut off too. Answer. I basically cut off my boyfriend's family because they're all weird as fudge. I just lost my dad and I've gone through some other pretty traumatic events and not one of them sent condolences, nor do they support me whatsoever. I've been with my boyfriend for 5 years and I don't even have a relationship with his siblings because none of them want to talk to me because they're shy. Yeah, I'm good on that. Story 88. Decided he would rather spend his time with his GF, now wife, and haven't spoken to him in about 10 years. And he would post on hanging out with our mutual friends at the time on social media. When I asked him in advance if he wanted to hang out or grab dinner, he would always respond, "Oh, I have to work this weekend," or "I'm hanging out with my GF after work, but he has time to hang out at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night when I'm resting for work the next day." Story 89. She used things she knew triggered me against me, spread rumors about me, stopped inviting me anywhere without explanation, and violated some boundaries. I'd known her for years. It was very hard for me to do. She had a bad home life, and she took it out on pretty much everyone around her. Story 90. Substances. We all did substances together. I decided to get sober and they didn't. So eventually I had to cut temptations out of my life. Unfortunately, it involves them too. Story 91. He became obsessive and weird. Found out he wasn't dating the girl he said he was, but intense stalking and harassing her. Didn't want to keep that type of person in my life, so I just told him to piss off and blocked him. Story 92. Almost all of my high school friends were pieces of shit that took advantage of me and berated me. Once I got with who would become my wife, I learned what it felt like to be around someone who actually appreciated me and said fudge off to that part of my friend group. Story 93. Because I'm not their free therapist. I'm kind af and people just want to talk about everything bothering them without listening to anything going on in my life. And heaven forbid something goes well with me. The Debbie Downers get worse. I don't need that shit in my life. You're not my friend if you can't celebrate nor comfort me and expect those things for yourself. Story 94. I could get over that he was a heroin addict. Just don't trust him with around money. But when I saw the brand new white supremacist tattoo that was too far, even if he did do it just to get access to substances. Story 95. It was too one-sided. Only really heard from her when she and her then boyfriend were fighting. Ditched me for lunch one day when we were literally at the car, when he called and asked her to lunch. That was the last straw. Hadn't talked to her for a couple of years, and the girl actually sent me an invitation to her wedding. I used it to scribble numbers on. Story 96. I was the one always reaching out. I said this time I will wait for him to reach out. Still waiting after years. Story 97. Did the not reach out and see how long it takes for them to see if you're okay test and never heard from them again? Story 98. Every one of them were scumbags. They would love to see you fail. Never had any dreams or goals, no ambitions. Anytime I had a goal or idea and I was thriving and getting ahead, they would always question me and try to bring me down. So it was the easiest decision to remove them from my life. I got ahead and made something of myself. Them who knows. I never look back and I won't. I'll never be rude to them if I saw them in public. I just want nothing to do with them. I don't wish anything bad on them. I just don't want them in my life. I only have one best friend now and I like it, like that we both have the same goals. We lift each other up and we are both thriving and we talk daily. Basically, he's like a brother. Sorry for the little rant, lol. Story 99. I stopped reaching out because she was jealous of me and leaving me on delivered, just to see what happened. Started hanging out with other people, forgot about her. She realized her mistake and apologized. I forgave her and waited for her to change something. She didn't. So I told her I don't want to be a part of this unbalanced dynamic and we are officially done. Never trust words, only action. Story 100. Got into an argument about politics, explaining how concentration camps aren't where fascism starts, they're where they end. His reply, maybe we need a little fascism. Story 101. When they didn't check on me for a 5 to 6 month period of time during chemotherapy. Trim that fat really quick. Story 102. He was a toxic dumbass who would shout at you for no reason whenever he had temper tantrums, which were often. The last time I hung out with him, he was walking up to female strangers in a bar and groping their breasts. Story 103. She went through 2 really difficult situations back to back. It changed her fundamentally as a person. She was really happy and energetic before everything happened, but afterwards she was mean and rude all the time. She was making decisions that were reckless and dangerous. I helped her as best I could, helped her get her job back and checked in with her lots, but a year in I just had to cut it off. She never got back to who she was. It really fudged me up because I had to mourn my friend and also wrap my mind around leaving someone because of trauma. I felt like a really shoot person for a long time, but at the end of the day, I did the best I could to help her work through it, and being around her while she lashed out at me and put herself in danger again and again just was too much. Story 104. He was an extreme homosexual, constantly trying to get straight guys to suck cock. I would laugh it off as flamboyant gay dude being gay. Then he was accused me of being homophobic for not sucking him off while he was high on some shoot. Always was on something rare to see him sober. Toxic as fudge. Story 105. Decided I didn't deserve to be her emotional punching bag and still be expected to apologize every time she snapped at me. Story 106. So that when we reunite, it can be all the better. And we can put the stupid idiot petty shoot behind us because we know each other's heart. And it's a beautiful thing. Story 107. He was possessive and rubbed it in my face that he had more friends than me when I was already barely hanging out with anyone. Just toxic behavior. Story 108. Good guy who was too immature. 90 of the conversations with him surrounded around fixing problems created by his bad decisions. At some point, I realized that I am prioritizing too many of someone else's problems over my own. Story 109. I had to leave an entire friend group so I could get sober. I still love those guys, but I had to leave for my own safety. Story 110. Realized she was stringing me along, so I called her out on it, and she didn't have good reason, so bye-bye. Story 111. She kept cheating on her husband for one. It made me realize what an ugly person she was. She'd bring her kid around the dudes and make him lie to his dad, or she'd ditch the kid with me. She'd tell the men her husband beats her to gain attention and sympathy. She'd tell her husband she was with me and make up stories about me making me look bad to cover her BS. She hurt a lot of people by doing all this, including the guys she was messing with, not to mention acquiring several STDs and transmitting them to her husband. You'd think she'd stop after the first STD. She and her husband were my childhood friends I had known for 30 years. It was hard to watch her do this to him. She became an insanely compulsive liar, which greatly affected our relationship as well. I tried really hard to get her some mental health help, begged her family to talk to her, but no one could talk any sense into her. Things ended really bad. I miss her a lot, but not how she became the last 5 years we were friends. Story 112. She openly cheated on her fiancé and read out his tragic DMs publicly as if he was the problem for being upset about it. Story 113. Would rather keep the status quo and be close with my abusive ex, who she didn't even like while I was dating him, and told me my abuse wasn't her problem. Final straw on many things she did. Story 114. She cut me off, and I honestly kind of deserved it. I was jealous because I thought she was replacing me with one of our other friends. Also at the time, I thought she was just using me to get plant substance products. Our relationship started out kind of rocky to begin with because she sort of didn't like me. But then we found out how similar we were and quickly became very good friends. And that isn't hyperbole, or me just assuming either. We shared the same favorite TV shows and interests and would talk at length about certain topics. Story 115. Because she kept whining that I never spent time with her anymore. Every time we would make plans, she would bail on me, so naturally I stopped asking. We would sometimes go to the gym together, but after a few turns of her bailing, I just started going by myself. She then complained about that too, saying that I always went without her and that it was one-sided. The final straw for me was when she posted on Facebook about how she had no friends, no one cared for her, and that she was so lonely after I had taken time out of my day to take her to the ER, where they diagnosed her with gallstones. I then sat with her until she went into surgery after convincing her that she should stay and get her gallbladder out and to stop crying about not being home to put her kids to bed when her husband was there and could do that. It was so stupid. I ended up blocking her shortly after. Story 116. My last best friend was just using me to fix his car, his house, landscaping, etc. My other friends were always co-workers, so when I quit, I didn't see them much, if at all. Story 117. Dasanabari. She was clingy as fudge, would expect to talk on the phone every day, sometimes multiple times a day. If I didn't answer, she'd call repeatedly, even if I'd told her in advance I was working and spending time with family out with my then BF, then text claiming some kind of emergency to get me to call back, which would always turn out to be something very minor. I also realized that every time she suggested we hang out, she'd insist on coming to my town, about 101 Jeju from where she lived, then turn up with no money for lunch or train ticket home, so I'd end up paying. This would be fine if it weren't for the fact that she'd always make an excuse when it came time to pay me back. Story 118. Because he kept unfriending me on social media, and then would turn around and send me another friend request. This happened 10 times in 6 months. I finally confronted him and asked him why he did this, and he said I hurt his feelings all the time. I've met him only one in person in 2 years. I'm friends with his wife in real life, so she and I are good, apologized for hurting his feelings, and then asked him for a specific example of when this happened, so I could avoid it moving forward. He implied I should already know, so I apologized again, told him I'm not a mind reader, and said I'd be civil with him when next we met. I then blocked him. His wife told me he gets agitated easily. She's better than me. I don't have time for games like that. Story 119. She ghosted me when I told her I was struggling, reached out to ask for money for a free cat, found out she was pregnant through a TikTok. Story 120. When we got into an argument, I wrote her numerous apology letters and she never accepted any of them. She gave me the silent treatment too. Story 121. I'm not sure how multiple personalities work, but I'm pretty sure this friend has it. She's a longtime female friend, which made it a little tougher to do. As a guy, most of my friends are men. I just had an unfortunate breakup, and her personalities kept swapping and even getting confrontational. For example, one gets angry about anyone suggesting her daughter is autistic, is an atheist, and the one most often presenting itself. The second is very combative, speaks rapidly, believes in a higher power, and talks openly about her daughter's autism. The third cries a lot and talks about not understanding what's going on in her head and pleads for help. Fun stuff. Through all the stress I already had, I cut her off. Also, no, I'm not a therapist. I'm not sure what she has, but if you have an idea, feel free to let me know. Story 122. Not just one friend, but a group of friends, totally fake as hell and would do anything to sabotage me to laugh and feel good about it. Story 123. Long story short, we were friends, lost touch for 2 decades, made up and dated for 3 years, then was cut off for being mental and psycho. Many regrets. Story 124. Because her husband made advances on me and she blamed me for it, even though she and everybody else knew he was a player. Story 125. Bestie had some mental health issue that they decided they didn't need to take medication for anymore. Downward spiral ensued, and I spent the better part of a year tiptoeing around trying to include them, but not too much as to overwhelm them. Once friend came out of their depression and began taking meds as prescribed again, they accused me of alienating them and judging them because of their mental illness. I couldn't win because they would do anything to secure the victim position, so I slowly backed out of that friendship. The post-year-long mental health breakdown attitude has continued and amplified. They are one of the most selfish people I know now, and it didn't just cost them my friendship. It cost them their family, got divorced, and their home had to move. It's an incredibly sad situation, and I desperately wish it had gone differently. Story 126. Was always there for him since we were teenagers. Was there for him during breakups. After the passing of one of our buddies who he knew since kindergarten. Helped him move like 5 times. Painted his apartments. Visited him when he moved to another city and so on. Only for him to not give a fudge when my dad died last year, who he knew for more than 15 years. No calls, no messages, and didn't even reach out to my brother and mother after it happened. Fudge him. Story 127. He was my roommate. Started dating a girl that did meth. Ended up waking up to the police in our apartment because her kids, who had moved into our apartment against my wishes, had escaped, and one of them almost got hit by a car running away from the house at like 5 a.m. Cops found a meth pipe sitting on the stove, and I had to spend the day explaining how he was lying when he said everything was mine. Story 128. I cut off many in the past 7 years that became increasingly polarized, both left and right. If you can't have a rational conversation without getting unhinged when someone isn't your echo chamber, I'm out. Story 129. She kept sending me naked pics of herself. We're both girls and straight. She was married at the time. IDK what that was about. I asked her to stop. She kept doing it. So blocked. Story 130. I haven't cut her off, but reduced contact. She's in a very stagnant phase of her life, and I've gone through so many changes to the point where I have a really hard time connecting with her. She hasn't allowed herself to grow or change in a very long time. She doesn't let herself be challenged and will not leave her comfort zone. She always talks about how she wants to travel and expand her horizons, but never puts feet to doing it. I still love her and we still talk, but it's frustrating to maintain a friendship with someone who talks about doing things, but never actually does them, and acts envious when I do things she wants to do, such as traveling. Story 131. To be honest, I'm not trying to make this political, but it's because it was in AA. I realized the preaching was fake. As soon as I realized they supported Trump, it was all over. The practice this in all affairs was fake. Then I knew who was real and who wasn't. Story 132. I haven't cut her off, but I never message her first. That's because even thought she claims in her best friend, she didn't even invite me to her engagement or wedding when she said I'm invited. Story 133. I didn't cut them off completely. I did distance myself though. You can try and help people all you want, but if they're unwilling to self-reflect and help themselves, then nothing is going to happen. Story 134. Because I can get incredibly avoidant. At first, clingy friends are nice to have, but it does eventually wear me down. Plus, poor anger management doesn't help when a friend isn't being great. Story 135. I outgrew the friendship and didn't know how to tell them. We used to work together and got along well, but work was really all we had in common. She moved to a different department and office, and I didn't see her much except for when she invited me over to dinner with her family. I did that several times. Held her first child at a few months old. Held her second child at a few months old. We got close, except every conversation we had turned to gossip about the place we used to work. I left the company and had other, more exciting things going on, but every single conversation circled back to, do you remember so-and-so they said this, that? It was annoying. I kind of just ghosted her. I still feel bad about the ghosting, but don't miss her one bit. I wish her well and all, but the friendship wasn't serving me, and I know I wasn't doing much for her since she always did most of the talking. If anything, I was company for her, but that's not good enough for me to still entertain her. Story 136. We were hanging out and out of the clear blue aggressively says, I fudge dislike words. Not that it makes any difference, but we were watching football. He had favorite players. Most were black. I just don't understand that mindset. This was around 2018 Wynane, and of course he's full MAGA now. Story 137. I really didn't want to, but he always started shoot. I've had to make amends for his shoot behavior too many times. Then he bought a MAGA hat. I'd love to reunite with him, but I just don't have the motivation just yet. Story 138. He's a narcissist who talks big game, but doesn't actually follow through or put in any work or effort. We worked on a bunch of creative projects together. The only ones that saw the light of day were a couple of albums for a music project where I took the reins, wrote 90 of the music, wrote the stories that accompany the albums, etc. He went to LA recording school to learn to be a mix engineer and horribly mixed our album. I had to literally teach myself how to mix, and I remixed it. Sounds 100x better. Dude thinks he's a genius. I remember taking a walk with him once. We would take walks and talk about our goals and dreams, and he stated, "I'm smarter than literally everyone on this planet." And he meant it. I was thinking, dude, you're not even the smartest person in this conversation. Is he intelligent? Sure. Is he a talented songwriter and singer? Absolutely. Does he have some good ideas? Definitely. But the dude is such a narcissist, and it's totally fueled by insecurities. So anyways, after trying to work with him and listening to his constant talking of everyone and everything else to make himself feel like less of a loser, I decided I didn't want to be around that anymore. And I just stopped working with him and hanging out with him. Another example of how he is, our mutual friend who is white just happened to. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care.